Welcome, everyone. It's going to warm up again this week. So this was the shop day. I am happy to introduce Jeremiah Ellis, who happens to be my neighbor and also is a fan of history. And I think you're going to enjoy his presentation a lot. He's a distinguished author, senior fellow with the Ramsey County Historical Society, and is more than a scholar. He's a tireless advocate for Black heritage and his rightful place in a broader narrative of Minnesota. His insightful article, St. Paul's District Leadership Tradition, A Century of the Sterling Club, which some of you may have read, earned him the prestigious 2022 David Gebert Award from the Minnesota chapter of the Architectural Historians. He serves on the St. Paul Heritage Preservation Commission, advising the mayor and city council on matters affecting the city's rich history. His reach extends across the state. He's also a board member of the African American Interpretive Center of Minnesota, ensuring that Black narratives are preserved and celebrated statewide. Jeremiah's multifaceted knowledge is reflected in his academic journey, holding a master's in public administration, a graduate certificate from in theology, a graduate of Metropolitan State, St. Catherine University, and St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. He left this for a few years and then came back. Jeremiah Ellis is a champion for Black voices and heritage, a tireless advocate for inclusive narratives, and a dedicated steward of history. His work ensures that Black chapters are woven into the fabric of Minnesota and beyond, a testament to his unwavering commitment to truth, inclusion, and social justice. Let me introduce Jeremiah Ellis.
Thank you so very much. I am excited to be here, excited to share. I'm going to give a little context. This wouldn't be possible without Marsha. Marsha lives next door to me. And since we moved in, we had a 3-year-old when we moved in, and he made sure Marsha was our friend. He was just destined to make sure Marsha was our friend. And so he's always out there like, hey, Miss Marsha, he's trying to make sure that we're all inclusive. And she finally acquiesced and welcomed us in wholeheartedly, which was particularly actually helpful during the COVID pandemic, call it the quarantine, distance learning time, when he was in the garage with me doing first grade learning. And anytime we come out for a break, like, where's Miss Marsha? Where's Miss Marsha? It was just a godsend to have something else to engage with and someone else to pester. And so thank you, Marsha, for being a good neighbor and for helping make this possible. I'm looking forward to sharing. One of the things that I know I got a lot of slides, but I want to make sure to get a little sense of what folks are interested in hearing and want to hear, so that I hit the high points or hit those points along the way. And so is anything in particular that really drew you out here on a cold Saturday morning, or just like, you know what, there's something about this that you'd like to learn more about? I'd love to hear it right now so that I can make sure I'm cognizant of that as we go through a few slides and some pictures. Yeah, please. Hi, Dick.
I like World War II history.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know what particular products they made up there at that plant.
Yeah.
How long was in operation? They close it, reopen, close it, so forth. But I volunteer at a place where you fly World War II airplanes.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in World War II history.
Absolutely. Is that the commemorative airport?
It is.
I mean, I've been there a couple of times. My younger brother is a pilot, and then have been invited out to be there a couple of times.
Have you seen our red tail Mustang?
I think so. I need to go back. Yeah, I need to go back. Yeah.
It's one of the Tuskegee Airmen.
Absolutely. Any other reasons or wants to hear, looking forward to? Yes.
I'm a real sucker for the untold story, forgotten stories, present. I like this whole movie.
Thank you. Yeah, I was sharing with some college students a while back that it's the inverse of stories that are always exciting to me. Like was that Wicked which is kind of a take on the Wizard of Oz and kind of retelling of that story in a few other ways as well. So yeah, definitely that's part of the reason why I'm bringing this up. Definitely. Anybody else? Right. So I've got to go through a couple of slides of kind of introduction. We'll do a little video, which is going to require everyone. Because the volume on it's going to come through here, but in order for everyone to hear. So I will get going. And so yeah, so we're here to talk about the untold story of St. Paul in particular, African American Rosies, free leader in World War II. That really short time period, and how that story became or isn't told, and kind of what I was able to uncover during my research over the last couple of years. I am forward clicking, and it's gonna. Okay. Well,
We'll just have to work together.
we'll work on this. Yes. Okay. This is my grandmother. And part of the reason I bring up my grandmother is this is kind of the story. This research wouldn't have happened without her. One of the things I wanted to share kind of at the top. My grandmother was born in Mississippi close to 90 some years ago, almost 100 years ago. She told me that growing up, she at 4 or 5 years old started picking cotton. And that was like how she grew up. And education was very important to her. She knew she had an aunt who lived outside of Mississippi, and because she had that aunt, she was able to leave the field and get a high quality education. And then when I was growing up, when I was in middle school, she continued to work on a doctoral degree. And so like education is hugely important to me and my family, which is the reason why my son is in here. He has an extracurricular sort of additional tutoring support that he has to do later on this morning. So he isn't here to share in this experience, because in our family, we got to make sure he's getting his education. But this is my grandmother, Roxy, and she told me when I told her I was going to New Orleans, she said, "You have to go to the World War II Museum." I'm like all of her grandmothers, all of her grandchildren. I said, "Of course, Grandma, whatever you say, I will do that when I'm there." And I didn't even think about it, but then what did I just commit myself to? Went to, and the reason why it was important to her that she went there, she is a charter member of the National World War II Memorial Museum. And the reason why she became a charter member is because her brother and brother-in-law are both veterans of the war. And so she became a charter member for that reason. And they said, "Charter members, anytime you're in town, we have something for you, come check it out." And so I was like, he sent me, much like the Queen used to send out the princes across the world to say, "Okay, I can't make it, you come, you do your thing." And so I went, and they gave me a few gifts to bring home to my grandmother. But as I was exploring the website, I was like, well, what am I getting myself into? I see this picture. You know, this is in the top you have the kind of the "we can do it" picture, and this is a kind of a reinterpretation of it with a Black woman with silver hair. I was like, what is this about? I've got to know more about what this is about. And couldn't stay for the actual presentation, but it was an advertisement for a documentary film called Invisible Warriors, which is about the national story of African American women during World War II, and how they helped how they were a part of supporting the war effort on the home front, particularly in places of manufacturing and government, and places that would not have been open to them prior to World War II, and only because the men were out and they needed the workforce were these Black women allowed to join the workforce. And I reached out to the documentarian, and he was like, "Well, there's got to be a Minnesota story. There's a story everywhere of this kind of work, and you should research it and find out more." And so that started me on this journey several years ago, because of my grandmother telling me to go to New Orleans, because I was going to New Orleans to find out more. And so I want to share the trailer to the documentary, which kind of gives a bit of a national context. And we're going to work the technology to see if this is going to go forward. Oh, and this is the part where we've got to be.
Women wanted for war production work. More and more men are being called into the armed forces. Their jobs must be filled, and filled now. And who can fill them? You women.
Working at the Navy Yard made me feel patriotic, that I did something to help the cause. We were doing something to help the boys, and it just made you feel special.
He looked at us, and we were all maybe 100 pounds apiece. He decided that we could be riveters.
He wanted to go join, and then it was as far as, and I was told in my face that we cannot accept you because you're black.
And I found out that they were putting 3 X's. I knew that was to recognize us as being Negroes, we were called at that time.
We just felt like that we have a job to do at home, and I felt real good about that. And we as women, we had to keep the home front up, because many of us did the jobs that they said only the men had done.
The first day on the job at the Navy Yard, I was scared to death.
When World War II started, I wouldn't let myself cry for anything. I was going to be strong and brave.
When men were in the service, the women had to take over, be the breadwinners, pay all the bills, and take care of the house.
There was a racist notion that black women carried venereal disease and other kinds of diseases.
I still suffer headaches. I take medication every day.
Washington was deeply segregated. It was so segregated that you had the feeling that you were in a foreign country.
We just worked hard all day, picking cotton till my fingers bled.
Well, you were sort of in slavery when you were sharecropping.
He just said, "Nick, if you bring your black ass in my office one more time and ask me a question, I'll fire you."
In Alabama at that time wasn't nothing free but a white man and a black woman.
I was able to bring a paycheck home higher than anybody in my family.
We can do it, and we did it.
Jeremiah, I know it's in your library of Congress. We read anywhere.
So occasionally, great question. Occasionally there are online screens available. The documentarian put it together, put a lot of his own money into it, make it happen. So he has some streaming capability, he's streaming for a little while. And so he is looking and has been looking to expand it, but looking for the right sort of monetary rebate or he got to get paid for his work. So we had him come to Minnesota a year ago. So that was an opportunity to see it, which was kind of a limited engagement you had to be there at the time. So yeah, there's it's great work and kind of hard to see, which is why I want to make sure trailer is required. Any other responses to hearing that trailer, seeing it, thinking about it? Powerful. Yeah. That's too. It made it easy. What folks will say is when they see that it clicks. And for a lot of folks, it's like, yes, that makes a lot of sense. And yes, we can report that. I really want to know more. So that's exactly what happened with me. I wanted to know more. Called the filmmaker up and was like, hey, if you ever in Minnesota, I'd love to see you and I'd love to, see the film. He's like, well, you got to know the Minnesota story. So that's where we decided here. So a lot of my research. So what I'm going to do is do a little back in the TCAPS, the Twin Cities Ordnance Plant, and then talk a little bit about the overview of quite a few of the women, and then get in depth on just a few of the women to kind of, because we know a little bit more about their lives, and then we'll wrap it up with some questions and some kind of and so in Hardin Hills or New Brighton, we had a plant that made ammunition. I believe all kinds of ammunition, and one of the things that I think was special about it is that it received this Army and Navy award, in which and received it 4 times, which is during that time, the highest quality sort of, ranking and award that these, government-owned company-operated plants would receive. And so, it was one of the best plants in the US. And it really, as I started to dig a little bit more, maybe trying to the awards for your radio right now. If they don't have any mission, they can't have. So it made so much sense that it was very important that across the world, there was places where ammunition could be developed and shipped off to our men and women on the field, and it had to be high quality. So Minnesota did a great job of having high quality, at least at this point, high quality ammunition available for our soldiers. And receive awards for that. And so this is a confidential document that I found in the archives. It has the male and female employees of the plant. So it indicates, when there were kind of the approximate number of men and women, and kind of separating it gender through the years. It's really kind of hard to see it itself. So in 1943 is one of the highest production times of this plant. And you can see that the women on the bottom row slightly outnumber the men in both the kind of the first half and the second. So that was different from the previous years and subsequent years, where women were really very much a part of the ongoing work of the plant in many different capacities. And so this is kind of a little more of the background. And so when Professor Cook, who made the film, started me on this path, one of the first places I found information about the Twin Cities Ordnance Plant was this report that called The Negro Worker in Minnesota, that the Minnesota Governor's Interracial Commission put together. And they were saying about over 1,000 African Americans were working in the plant at its highest rate. And at the time, it was about 20% of the African American workforce. And so I remember in the state of Minnesota, saying this, wait, there's an employer in the 1940s in Minnesota hiring 20% of the African American workforce. And why don't we not even have this? And so, and not only that, it's not that there was just 20%, it was the variety of work job categories. It wasn't just people who cleaned, custodians and matrons. It was people in all kinds of work areas, such as timekeepers, guards, packers, accountants. And so all over the plant there is the place where African Americans were. And this was contrary both to the national context as well as the local context. This report talks a little bit more about how companies across the state of Minnesota, the metropolitan area, how many of them did not at that time all African workers. And so this was an anomaly in the situation here in Minnesota. But then for the national context, quite a few of the government-owned plants that produce ammunition kept African Americans in very few roles, particularly around housekeeping and custodial spaces. And so this was kind of a national leader, and was seen as a national leader of integration here in Minnesota. So at least at that time. And so over my research, I was able to identify these women, a long list of names, about 40, and I got to estimate there are over African American during this time period, during the World War II time period. And so this was just not actually, this is thing, at the end, but just wanted to bring out the names of the individuals as I found, and sad that at the time that we've been able to, through the archives of the newspapers, I've been able to identify some women who spent their time and were dedicated to the cause and employed them. The bolded ones are names that you might see, probably will see later on in the policy. And so, like I mentioned earlier, This is a national story. The national part of the story is that nobody else in the country had it figured out as well as Minnesota. You know, I'm Minnesotan through and through, and my wife who is not, will say that Minnesota's the center of the universe. Which it is. And so we are national leaders. I wanted to make sure everyone knew that this is an example of our national leadership. This is a newspaper article from it's called the Pittsburgh Courier, which was an African-American newspaper out of Pittsburgh, but had national. The African-American community at that time had a few national papers that went all over the country, particularly a lot of them went in connection with the Pullman porters. So gentlemen who worked on the train lines would take these newspapers, African-American, take them to the African-American community as they were moving out. And the Pittsburgh Courier was one of those. And so this national newspaper said, something happened in Minnesota, and you all should know, the whole world should know about it. And so this is a clip that I found in Minnesota Historical Society archives. Later in my research, so excited to see that because it had names and pictures and kind of idea of some of the work. And so I'm gonna share a little bit more about some of these pictures because it's kind of hard to see. And so we'll zoom in a little bit more on some of these folks, and then we'll get into some deeper. So this is the custodial team. And as you know, there was no surprise to me as that there's an African-American custodial team that kind of makes sense. That's where a lot of folks work. As you said, that's I'm in the 40s. And then also clerical. Okay, I'm like, cool. That's an opportunity that probably wasn't available immediately at that time. And so this is kind of a little bit better than just custodial. It's outside of those ranges. And then got into a little bit more deeper to see, cafeteria workers. Makes sense. People, a large plant with thousands of folks need to eat, and sure, we can help the Americans in this would be fun, right? And then continued on and to find out more. So we've got machine operators. And I was like, wait, the African American women machine operators in Minnesota in 1940. Okay, wow, that's huge because nobody else was really doing that. So this is floppy hairs. I'm sorry, I mentioned the names. Louise, Mary Louise Hubbard, and then there aren't names here, but on the names that is important. Floppy hairs. This time was a machine operator. We'll see her later on in a different role. And then Larissa Lawson, another machine operator, in Iron Hills or in Brighton, in that space. Lois Grissom, another machine operator. And this is so, one of the things that's huge is that this news is going across the country. Like, it's not just local, because like we think we're good, we bring our stories up. But this is a news that's going across the country. Peggy Martin, we'll see her later. This is an interesting little story about her. A bit about her in back. Nurse, Margaret Legendary, was thinking about, and so I didn't know enough about her story, but my sense of the radio of the plant is that she wasn't just limited to the nursing care of African Americans. This would have been for some folks, different experience to have an African American caring for them in sort of that professional role at that time. And so this is just kind of an indication of how maybe forward thinking. And then our friends at the Minnesota Historical Society found a few more photos for me. This is Ophelia Sewell, another cafeteria worker. That's the mostly a machine operator. Like being inspected at that time, just kind of photos along like this shows what we're doing, kind of thing. And then what may or may not make sense to folks. This is the Office of Negro Personnel. These are the 5 folks that making sure that this work, that the integration efforts are successful. In particular, the gentleman in the middle, Cecil Newman, took on Ethel Maxwell Williams, who is my history prep. We'll get into her. And then, so sister video person. And so at first you think, okay, she's like the secretary to the guy who's in charge of station movie. No, he is, well, he's running it, and, you know, and then Naomi Thomas, supervisor of maintenance, like I said, there's quite a big, gotta be quite a sizable sort of group of masons of activities. Guards. I never would have thought there were African American guards, women guards at the plant. So this is from the St. Paul Recorder, the African American newspaper here locally at that time, and wanted to share, you know, from TCOP. These are our folks in our community who are serving the war effort in this capacity. And then we talked about Flossie Harris earlier. She was a machine operator. At this stage, she is a news reporter. And so one of the ways that I know, what I know about the plant is that there were a newspaper at the plant, and that allows us to, you know, have stuff written down. And I think that effort probably to help keep people in mind, kind of help understand this is happening near the plant. This is kind of the community raising awareness, raising spirits during this time. This is Elizabeth Ainsworth, who earned a certificate of merit for their good ideas. Not able to find out what their good ideas was. She was in building 1006. B shift, it was about all I could figure out to find. But nonetheless, she was someone who had a great idea, at least recognized it. And Eula Sims, again, she takes visuals, so she's kind of helping to see where things are. And she is the one in her. So what's great about the Twin Cities Ordnance Plant newspaper is that they have these little spotlights on books. And so we get to hear or get to read their words, how they're thinking about their space. She's a reader, her favorite pastime is reading, and she's building a lot. What the plant reported in her, which is Minneapolis will allow that today. I think, well, this is Eva Sessions. There's more information I'm bringing back, but she is reading. She's got a son in Europe and hadn't heard from him in a while. Opens up Time magazine and she reads an interview about him. And so I think it's a your emotionality. You don't hear from your son. You don't know what's going on. He's away. You're at work, and all of a sudden, boom, there he is. That's just a connection. It was exciting that when I was able to read that her story. And then Teddy Martin, you saw her earlier. One of the things that I thought was hilarious is that they're comparing her to Lena Horne. They're saying she looks a lot like Lena Horne. She's more beautiful than Lena Horne. Everyone should know who she is. So we plan. Yeah. She'll get you. There's a Harris, we saw her earlier as a machine operator. There was a question for the newspaper had asked about folks who would rather work from home. That's a 30 minutes of a question. And there was a lot of discussion amongst the, I think 6 or 7 folks that they had. You prefer working from home. Get into it and like keeps her up, ready to go because we're there to make ammunition and products for the BDN. Okay, so that was kind of a brief overview. These are some of the people who work there. When I started telling people 1,000 African Americans in northern Ramsey County in the 1940s, first question I kind of looked like, how did they get there? Because most folks understood that like African Americans were redlined in these communities in central St. Paul, South Minneapolis, a little bit over North Minneapolis. That's a trek. That is some 11 to 15 miles away from home. Even now, African Americans aren't currently in that part of the country, and so folks are like, so there are a couple ways that we know it. This is an article from, again, the St. Paul newspaper, St. Paul African American newspaper, talking about Mrs. C.J. Wiggins, Mrs. Geraldine Lee, and Ms. Ida Mosley were in a car going back from work. And they were rammed by another one of their cores. Here's the thing about this. We don't know, so this is Walter Lowe. That's not Walter Lowe. This don't, but he is. So this is the front page of this stuff. But Walter Lowe hit them. One of them had to go to the hospital. And the thing about the limitation of my research in the newspapers is we can't tell all the details of was it racially motivated or not. One of the things that comes out is that the owner of the plant, Mr. Horn, also subscribes to this newspaper. So he's got this newspaper, and then he's got his own newspaper. I don't think he's gonna talk about racial incidents in his own newspaper. And the publisher who actually, who actually works at the plant, isn't going to publish gory details about the racial incident, but there may be some clues in kind of this incident that there might have been something we don't know. And so people are approved. And so one of the ways that we also know that people are approved is in the archives. I see that I found this ride share. So this is a picture of a door at the plant that lists everyone's looking for a ride. Are you a passenger? Do you want passengers or do you want a ride? So it helps people to connect which ship are you on, how do we get there? So that's one way people get to from blurred line communities. And then the other way is through the bus. This is through the plant's bulletin. There's this cartoon with this neat little phrase, early to bed, early to ride, you'll get a seat before the other guy. And so there's always a rush to make sure you get on the bus to get to work, and get to get to work so you can relax. And so that's one, so that's the other way that folks tend to get the custom. And so I learned the St. Paul newspaper again. Alex Murray, who lived in St. Paul, on St. Anthony, which is just a lot north of Rondo, which is now destroyed and before St. Anthony continues to exist. He broke her leg on the way to work, on the way home from work, trying to catch the bus. So she's on the plant campus trying to catch the bus, and she broke her leg. And I'm like, okay, well, in winter time in Minnesota, you know, we get ice all the time, and it happens whenever, right? That makes sense because this is, you should check it. It's in May. She broke her leg months ago. So I'm like, okay, so this is March, maybe February. A lot of ice could happen. Slip and fell. I'm gonna find out in an earlier article that Alex May began from St. Anthony Avenue in St. Paul. Was on the job in the sales spot on the job late shift when a fellow employee ran to her, causing her to fall. And again, was sent to the hospital and slowly recovered. Again, this is an incident that came up. I don't know for sure all the details around it, but it suggests to me that the integrated efforts that were nationally recognized may not have been as wonderful on the local surface. This is my interpretation of this, because we grew up here, we understand that things are always at the so yes, I was in the universe, not always perfect, but we're getting there. And so I don't want you to just remember Alice Manning as the woman who broke her leg. There's more to Alice's story than that. So I want you to remember her as the woman whose husband surprised her on her birthday with the house. And not only that, so and so she's not just a woman who broke her leg. The date is not on, so I don't know for sure before that. I have to check that for sure. But yeah, she someone who has a full life, with a husband, who has a community around her, who cares for her, and not just someone who experienced horrible incident. So luckily the newspaper kept that part. So that is Alex Manning, one of the first five sort of in-depth sort of covered African American women's work. The second one here is Grace Grimes. And this is a picture of her from the St. Paul Dispatch. I remember growing up, there was the orange boxes for the thing called dispatch. It's no longer part of our media landscape, but the same called dispatch had a picture of Grace Brandt, doing her job, visual inspector along the lines, making sure that the ammunition that went out was hot. She must have been pretty good at it, because she's not only pictured here, in the newspaper. So someone said, "Oh, you take a picture, with her being photographed." They, in turn, inside the plant, created this poster saying, "Careful workers are happy workers." So there's something about race that for people to say, "She's a good person, she's a good worker, she's an example we want folks to see." Of the 6 women on there, we'll pick out which one's great. So this was, I found this poster at the Anoka County, Anoka County Historical Society. They have all the plant records because, not because the plant is not in Anoka County, but the company that owned the plant was based in Anoka County. All that federal cartridge company. As well as just a great picture. Is also in the news. The copy of that poster is in the newspaper in the St. Paul Recorder and the Minneapolis spokesman. So yeah, I can make news. It's like this is one of our own posters about being careful with. And so we talked a little bit about Grace, we talked a little about Alice. The next woman I'd like you to know a little bit more about is Lily Preston. Now, I don't know a whole lot about Lily Preston, but because of Jamal Brown, who was a reporter for the newspaper at that time, we know that in the 1944, I believe, Lily had been working with the plant for 2 years. And so there was some longevity there. There was a commitment to the work, and we'll get to know a little bit about Jamal Brown. But it was also, so I was able to dive in a little bit deeper about Lily Preston and find in the Teacot newspaper that she lives in St. Paul. She at least been there for worked at the Teacot for 4 years or 3 years. And this article says that she's very conscientious worker, great asset. Her kindness is one of her greatest assets. It's her kindness towards all of her fellows. And so there's something about Preston from St. Paul that I wanted to make sure I shared, that she was part of this work. Yes, she's amazing, which isn't necessarily the most lucrative of jobs or most highly paid, but nonetheless, she's going to work. She's been there for 3 years, and she's an asset. Family and folks know her. So I tried to dive in a little bit more. To find out her birthday. So in the St. Paul Recorder, we have her birthday, March 5th. And so she was an avid either subscriber or someone who wanted to make sure her birthday was displayed every year after year. We would see March 5th at her birthday, and she's very much part of the community. And she is on St. Anthony Avenue as well. So St. Anthony again, just around Rondo, 273. And so one of the things as I'm seeing these advertisements, it makes these women for me more real. I know where this place is or where this house was. It helps make that connection. Some women who may be in some of the same circles that I've been connected to. Having a picture or something that before, it just helps make it more real. And so that's part of what I'm trying to bring out in this research. And I'll just mention here, because this clip actually happened to have 2 of our Rosies in it. So there's Lily Preston, and then Mrs. Junal at this time from. She is part of what's called the Agnew sorority. Tell you a little bit more about that group later on. It speaks to the interconnection of the St. Paul's African American women in the community, to be mentioned in separate articles in the same day, in the same newspaper, saying that there's a community here beyond just the plant and beyond just living in the community. They're a part of a society that helps create and brings on the next generation. And so I mentioned Junal Brown. And so this is a picture of Junal Brown earlier in her life when she worked at the plant. She was a newspaper reporter. We saw earlier she was reporting on, I think, building 1006. And one of the things that I love about this work is that as I've been uncovering and sharing, I've been able to make connections. And so the other day, I was able to talk to one of Junal's daughters about this work and about this research, and was able to kind of, so this may be kind of different. So I'm going through newspaper articles and looking at census records, and kind of getting a little bit on board. And I feel like that's just kind of like the phone kind of structure. But to talk to someone who knew these people, these women, she really fleshed them out. And so it made Junal's story much more whole. But I was able to find in kind of this gap that she was often part of a multi-generational household. It was often either her parents and grandparents in the household, or her parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, or her children, herself and her parents and her sisters, like all in the same household, which speaks to me about this family unit. And so I was sharing that with her daughter, and she said, well, one of the things you have to know about, Brown and her family, is that they were very connected to St. James. The church was very important to this family, and who they were has a lot to do with their Christian background, their really grounding in what's important in sharing the community, being part of work of supporting the church and the community. And so, as a recent high school graduate at this time, she graduated in 1939 from Central High School, and then was employed at the plant. One of the things I'm interested is that her sister graduated about the year before, and the census record indicates that her sister was in housekeeping. And so not like just keeping house, but also like someone who cares for food, because I make it go to someone else's house and helps to take care of that. Which brings me to one of the things that the filmmaker was telling me, is that at this time, African American women, for the most part, were restricted to either working in the field as sharecroppers, as was kind of showed in the trailer, or working in someone's home, being a domestic worker. And so this is an economic opportunity for a recent graduate to be in a space to be a part of business, be a part of growing their own personal income, and that has a direct impact on the civil rights movement. These women were able to earn money and support their community, and then have dollars to support the NAACP or League, and support the efforts that led to the civil rights movement. This generation of women undergirded that movement, not just here locally, but kind of nationally, because of the opportunities they had during the war that they actually made that. So Junal Brown, young woman at this time, and connected to the St. James. And so this is when she was a little bit older in the 1960s. Junal is circled there in blue. She is a member of what's called Jack and Jill, which is a organization of mothers who are taking care of their children in sort of a collective response, and then also supporting them wholly with opportunities, field trips, networking, and committed to kind of almost like a sorority for their children. So This is three members of the Jack and Jill, three Jack and Jill mother leader, actually, leader in the Jack and Jill group, contributing to these men here who were leaders in the NAACP, single NAACP. So it again goes to kind of that commitment that Ms. Brown received from her family to take care of the community, connected to the church. And that was, it's instilled in her early on and continued on beyond that. One of the things that I wanted to also share, you may notice that next to Ms. Brown, or Brad at that time, she got married, is, you may recognize this one? That is Josie Johnson. The Josie Johnson. I wish I had a prize to so yes, the folks have called her Minnesota's mother of the civil rights. There's a new documentary out about her, and so that sort of connection goes to, you know, think about civil rights movement and mothers connected in that space, and because of the economic mobility that was made possible, has a greater impact to support membership and work of the NAACP locally and nationally, and all sort of almost and we are in this together community saying we have some opportunity, we need to do better, we need to start putting in places where we haven't been able to push or haven't gotten the trust. So, Dr. Johnson, I think do all of these. And so that's a little bit about Janelle Brown, right? And I'll share this. So this is another picture. This is the member committee of the St. Paul NAACP. In blue here is Janelle again. Not only is it her. Okay. So Janelle's here in blue. Next to her is her mother. And between the two of them standing is her sister. So two daughters and a mother, all on the NAACP committee to raise membership and continue the civil rights work in St. Paul. And you know, when I talked to Janelle's daughter, she said her family was very connected to St. James Anglican. So you have not only Ms. Brown, Mrs. Brown. This is the pastor of St. James Anglican, Reverend Mill. And so there's this whole connection to the African American church, civil rights movement, and more. And this was in the early 40s. And so this commitment to this community that I learned of only because I was able to have a conversation comes to me more clearly. But I seen this picture before, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's so that they're there, but it's hard to read the deeper connections of why her daughter would say, you know, it's the church that really helped solidify her family. And so now you may be wondering, okay, so if you know a little bit more about people here, who's this woman in the And so this is my history credit. Ms. Maxwell Williams, who is a generation older than many of the workers at the plant. And she is again at the plant as the assistant director of Negro personnel. And she has a background in social work. She's been a social work teacher. And I think it's just kind of to understand what was important, what they were thinking about in having African American women in a space where, for the first time, working in integrated spaces, what could that mean, and why it would be important to have a social work background in someone who's a little bit older, guiding these women and men to understand not just about your work right now, there's a larger movement here. We've got to step it up. We've got to be the best of the best. And we've got to look beyond some of the racial incidences that happen and indeed do our best to take care of not just ourselves, our job, but our community as well. And so, again, this is, we made several pictures before, this is a national article, which really spurred on the reason why this article is important is because it's a national article talking about what's happening in Minnesota. And at the center of it is Ms. Ethel Maxwell Williams, who is, like I said, the woman who is in charge of making sure that this is successful. She's the boss, and the way I come to that conclusion is that this is another article in the Pittsburgh Courier that talks about the lack of discrimination in the jobs in Minnesota, and how the plant ought to be an example, a model for others across the country. And so this is a conversation, this is kind of the first record of that conversation of Minnesota doing something different. And behind that difference is Ms. Williams, her social work background, her being a generation older, her kind of bringing these women in, probably because she knew something from her involvement in the NAACP, and said, okay, we've got to help make this effort be successful. This is kind of the first indication that that's one of the things that's happened. And then the National Urban League has a magazine called Our Opportunity Journal, Negro Life, has a half-page spread on Ms. Williams, which I geeked out on, which if you want to read the whole thing. So Ms. Williams covers quite a few labor relations, personnel adjustments, race relations, all in the related sphere of administration. So like, it's clear, like, this is not just the assistant to the director, she's like in there making sure things are happening. And it goes on further to say, kind of the leader of the St. Paul Urban League and beyond is saying, the work of Mrs. Williams is a challenge to the employers in the United States, and that this is a demonstration that Negro women can make a definite contribution when given the opportunity. And so it speaks to kind of at that time, the lack of opportunity, the idea that women, African American women did not have the opportunity, and she was a part of that story, and saying that if given the opportunity, with African American women can be a part of that conversation, can be leaders, and can demonstrate that they are just as good at doing the job which the documentary gets into. And so, okay, so you got the National Pittsburgh Courier saying this thing about something different in Minnesota, the National Urban League saying something different happening. And so then we get to what's St. Paul, what are we saying about our stuff? What are we saying about ourselves? And so this article from the St. Paul Reporter is saying that Ms. Williams is indeed an example. And it's been helpful in the East to have someone modeled after her position, the plants in the East. So to be that go between administration, that kind of help among African employees to be successful. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the outcomes that we want for our war machine, our ability to produce ammunition, our ability to produce the planes, the submarines. This is what it takes. Someone has to be in a role, at least at this point, to make that connection to help this be successful. Otherwise, it runs the risk of not having the kind of positive outcomes that we're trying to get. Yeah. And then I'll get back to this fragmented society. It was a group of women engaged in business. So think about Ms. Jamal Brown, recent high school graduate, wants to seize this economic opportunity. High school, want to get a business, have this experience. There's a network now of African American women who are meeting, talking about being in business in the public sphere. They invite Ms. Williams out in the mid-1940s, and Ms. Williams' thoughts is, do we get the jobs we deserve? And so I would really love to hear what she had to say. London space, have you been in the States of kind of negotiating across the planet? I hadn't worked in social work taught in social work in Atlanta, and then find out later on in her biography, she is on the St. Paul Welfare Board and a number of other organizations that help kind of stitch together the civic infrastructure, I'll say, in Minnesota. I wonder what she has to say about who get the jobs that we deserve and how to make that kind of happen. So, this local group of African American women who are engaged in employment outside of kind of homes or the previously limited sort of spaces where African American women could work. She invited her to be part of that conversation. Not only that, this I think is my last slide. I'm sure. She graduated from the University of Minnesota, both her master's degree and her undergraduate degree. Part of a sorority of African American women called Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and in the mid 1940s, after the war, they established a graduate track. And so one of the things that is different in the African American community when it comes to the fraternities and sororities, there is this beyond college expectation that there is community service, there is work that needs to happen, and it is required, not required, but membership is really geared around service to community beyond just the college. So she helped establish the graduate chapter of Alpha in Minnesota in 1948, and really is about helping people that whose work right now is about that kind of service community. I think they had the capital recently, and help to be a charter member of that. Okay, so I'm almost done. We can talk. So we've had a chance to talk through briefly quite a few of these women, just understanding what their roles were in the plant. We got names and faces that go along with that, what their experience, and love to know some more. And so we've done kind of a re-rolling of something, and then diving deep into these 5 women. So, saying there's no picture, and Grace, we saw a couple pictures of her, Ms. Preston, and the room. One of the things that in my analysis of this work of these women is it's the greatest amount of information. It's the women with the highest amount of academic money. People who have money, able to tell their story out there, all documented, and put pictures of it. And so as I think about these 5 women, Alice, we don't so she is missing from that history. We know a little bit more about Grace and Lily, and quite a bit more about Janelle, but it is imperative, at least meaningful to me, that I've been able to call out from their name, some of their story, because the truth is I don't know what happened. So it's been important to me to share their story and be able to think about what are we doing for the story of those lower socioeconomic backgrounds, making sure that their stories are cared, preserved here in our community, so that I'll leave it there for that for the conversation, and love to have them. I didn't talk as much, so I'm a little thirsty.
I like to hear
Watch, we'll get the recording and I'll be in trouble. Yes.
Women live or they work. I ask that because most of the manufacturing plants build facilities off-site for their workers. They duplexes, the sidewalk, the carports, but they didn't allow blacks to live there. So most of these people in Twin Cities
Go back. They continue to live in the Red Line community in St. Paul, Minneapolis.
Okay.
I didn't hear of anyone who lived anyplace else other than these traditionally African American communities.
I'm reading a book about World War II, and it's based on the diaries of 40 individuals.
Yeah.
Who experienced World War II in the fall of 1942. Included civilians, military people, Asia, Europe, and America. and one of these was a woman in Savannah, Georgia. And the plan opened up that they were doing liberty ships. And they were asking anybody to come. They were hiring men, brown, black, white, things like over on flat.
Yeah.
And they're all being paid the same. But she had difficulty getting there and getting back because she wasn't allowed to live in the community nearby. So she was riding back to the bus for wherever she lived. She had a family, but she liked it because the income was great, an opportunity for her. And she spoke very highly of the work she did.
Yeah. The work that they contribute to goes a long way, but overcoming those sort of obstacles. Think about the commute, being away from your family. And yeah, the money's good, but you're sacrificing this time. But you know, it's the work. And there's kind of this collective, we need to do something, and everyone's got to sacrifice in some way.
Hopefully, that other kids and regardless of race or religion.
I haven't been able to determine if that's exactly true in this plant here. I have a sense that it probably is, but I haven't been able to find those details for sure. It reminds me of so the article I wrote about the Sterling Club, one of the Sterling Club founders or charter members went out to the East Coast in I think the 1920s and was part of establishing one of those, was the first like African Americans to lead one of those towns kind of right around the spaces where people work. Government efforts, so that can government sponsored towns. And so it's hard to tell like what that would have meant here locally if there were actually folks who lived close by. If African American women were allowed to live close by. I don't think that I didn't read anything, granted my research is limited, I didn't read anything about local housing available for anyone.
Most of your research was in the Untold plant. I thought there was some other war plans that maybe were in the South Metro Valley, or even they turned one of the buildings at the state fairground into a building, the propeller plant. Have you run across any other information from other plants in the area or done extra work in those areas?
Very little. So my focus during the short time of the fellowship was into Ramsey County. So I was like, okay, let's target this work to Ramsey County. But in the process, a couple of newspapers talked about the Gopher, yeah, and it was in South Metro, Downsview. It was in Rosemount or Apple Valley in the South Metro, and there were protests and or letters that that were or reports of protests and or letters to those plants to hire African American people. I have to look again. So that report I mentioned, the kind of statewide report on employment of African Americans, may have mentioned that plant as well as one of those that did not hire African Americans. And so, yeah, taking another look. But yeah, so yeah, lots of the limitations are time and space, and then also mostly the African American newspapers and the TCOT newspapers. So there's limited perspective there, which is why I like the conversations with elders goes a long way.
I'm thinking about these people having concept of people opportunity and finding ways to not like you have a food industry for manufacturing, people need the employment and maybe the normal group that are employed there were often at war. So different groups of people need to be trained to use their talent abilities. That's why I think it's a lot on the job training. We're after the war, were they able to use those valuable skills that they acquire in other areas that they spur off other businesses? You know, other opportunities that
there is yes and no. So I'd say, so we have the 1950 census, which talks about, has an indication of where some of these women were, after the war. The film will say, the boys came home, the women left the plants. That doesn't mean exactly that they, they left the workforce. One thing, two big things going on. African American women have been in the workforce forever. It's always been the African American women who have worked outside of the home. It's been consistent for generations. And so it isn't new to have African American women work outside of the home. But what is new, I think, after the war is the ability, that having had demonstrated ability to contribute to the household in ways other than domestic workers and field workers. And so one example, I believe it was Grace Bryant. I looked at her census record in the 1950s, and she had since that time gotten divorced, had another job in the manufacturing industry. And so I think that her experience at TCOP allowed her to demonstrate that she could be in that space. And I don't know her family situation in particular, but know that in many families, particularly in that time, if a woman is making more money, that can be a source of tension in a marriage. And so, don't know that, I didn't read her divorce decree and all that good stuff. But that could be part of that tension that led to the divorce, the ability to have very economic opportunity, particularly at that time. The mindset, maybe some gentlemen, for that I have to, and she better not, because it's my role. Some of us have learned from this. Hope that addresses your question.
I used to work for Honeywell in the 80s, and same time we were talking about we're operating, and they were producing in Portland again. And when you walk to the plant, if you got anything that could start as spark, good carrier came out being right around the floor. So they were always worried about the ordnance out popping up. And in fact, the workstations were designed so that when they did, because we did have those, whether it was 20 millimeter round, small caliber, you would it would go off workstation. So those, when we talked about the safety aspect, that was critical. Because if you can imagine more than the fire crack in this room, and then coming back to work and do it the next day. They really did report the stuff popping out occasionally. So is it happening maybe?
That reminds me of when I this so when so two parts of that. There were quite a few advertised or sort of notices in the bulletin before the plant bulletin became a newspaper. It was just a bulletin. It was like, women are going to start working here. Women need to dress differently. They need to make sure they have, their items tied. You got to pay extra close attention, man, because you're not looking at the women. You got to keep focused on your work. And all kinds of things as kind of the workforce is starting to change. These indications of we want to be safe in a way that they hadn't thought about before. Distraction. I think it was mostly men that were distracted. Is that kind of that's what he asked for? And then also early on in my slide deck showed. Sorry to go over that again. When the workforce started to there was this effort to kind of demonstrate why women, why workforce needs to advance, and why, at least gender integration is important part of what needed to happen. And a lot of it was around safety. We got to really hone in on make sure this remains a safe place. I'm taking a look, but I'm not sure exactly if those were targeted towards women or targeted towards men. Around safety, I think it was maybe a mix. So just remember a couple of cartoons that I get to drag on to the archives down at the microfilm room. He was so cool. But like, I was like, okay, I'm gonna scroll through. You see the cartoon, slow down. So we can take a look at the cartoon. And there were a couple of these, like really like old school sort of impressions of how men and women are working in the same place together. Kind of a little bit further.
I've worked at many times, and you had that one accident catching the bus. I will tell you that you have people lined up, ready to bolt up the door, and it's just like school getting out, and they are all rushing right out. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
You can go here and then we'll go back.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your talk. How old were you here? You were still there. Was there a range from younger or single or married? You know, did you have a sense of what age they were?
Yeah. So, the documentary film, a lot of the women were in their 20s. And so, but what I found in this research that I hear, quite a few were married. So, married in 20s is not, but more of a range, kind of prescriptive. If someone was suggesting in the previous presentation that they would only want to hire single women, not to be for or they would only want to hire married for other reasons. So, it makes sense. You know, I talked about at the end there, you chose Mrs. Williams, who was older, kind of to lead people. Grace, you know, at high school, and younger. So I think that kind of range. Really, those working in kind of the manufacturing part were not near retirement. Where did that come from?
I'm looking seeing the pictures of the different people, the women there, just kind of wondering if there was some age limitation for hiring the women, or there was any age group, or if there's limitation if you were married and had kids and your husband was strong and you kind of look after the children, that's everything.
I think it's one of those in the middle of the work, and it reminds me a little bit about the quarantine. Remember, we would all go to the airport to get tested for COVID. You know, these workers at that, you know, the COVID testers at that time, you know, were probably in their 20s. Didn't necessarily, they probably didn't think of that job as kind of the long-term career. But it was a part of the effort to make sure we were all staying safe. And I feel like they're between those, and probably, you know, a lot of these women would you know, finish in World War II or something. The boys would come home and they would move on to something different. And so this is part of the reason why the story is told, because I think a lot of these women were like, okay, I had a great job for 3 years, and then I moved on. And you know, the rest of life shifted again. So kind of like we did 3 years in quarantine, COVID sort of mix, and now we're like, hey, that's the thing you do, that's how people report. And not necessarily documenting, thinking that they had a great impact, seeing that they're part of the national. So maybe we really got that sort of decades ago.
In your research, did you come across any of these items that you found at the arsenal at Northwest Airlines or Honeywell, because Northwest repaired and upgraded bombers at home field during the war. So I was wondering.
Yeah, yeah, home field is definitely kept there. But that does remind me, I'm taking a look at the Negro Worker in Minnesota report. It does highlight that I think, I think it was Northwest Airlines at the time, that hired a few African Americans and would only hire them in custodial jobs. That was called out particular. I'm not gonna say it was Honeywell. There's another organization, I don't know, I remember exactly, did not, it was like, we don't hire African Americans, we don't. So, very clear, like, the, I believe it was the Urban League sent out a survey. All the employers in the local area, half of them came back, and of those, half that came back, a good chunk of them said, we don't hire African Americans. And those that we do, we keep them in these categories, but that all came out in the report. I remember what Airlines was a part of that report, they submitted something, that was limited, but I don't recall Honeywell having been documented. What's your sense for how that may have happened?
Well, I moved to Minnesota in 1980, and I only worked for Northwest Airlines. And when I first worked for them, I was in private hiring and taught basic documentation. Study, you know, had to develop work with history and black involvement. I've been working involved in Northwest Airlines, and it was quite neat for the longest time, even when I got there. But I was wondering about Unveiling and also that period of time during the war at home field. Yeah, because of all the work that was done there when there were B-24s and other.
Lots of upgrades.
Yeah. The upgraded stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sounds like a part of these should need to be explored and draw those connections. For folks.
Yeah,
How that is impact today as well.
Yeah.
I really like how you put the historical context and lighting the later years, and emphasize, you know, these are small actions during the time of opportunity of people, and how it did move things on at a time that civil rights, the outlook was pretty bleak, but then you have people with visions, like, yeah. And you know, that the recording is back to a political point. Certainly in you, looking at the future, the more opportunities, and how important that is. I was supposed to go for a long time. Why do you think that it really made it? Yeah, and these people also grew the organization that was telling you were building, civil rights and equality.
Part of, thank you for that. Part of when I was pulling together the research, I didn't want to limit, at least my presentation, of women just in their workplace, because it's all who they were, the job that they did in the 1940s. There's more to who they are. I've seen some tendencies of African Americans being put only in spaces around labor and saying, giving the impression that only African American contributions only in their labor, and not about community development, spiritual life, and so it's very important for me to make sure that whenever possible, talk about those next to the story, when not before the story tells, of understanding, you know, this is your job is just all who you are.
Why did you have to employ any unique or pivot to different strategies? You were just researching this that you hadn't done before, or strategies you found you had to apply for Black women in the workforce, women, voices in Minnesota, or voices in general? Is there anything unique that came out?
I remember spending a day, all day, at the Anoka County Circle, thinking through the document, which isn't something that hasn't been my approach. It's mostly young enough to say I did a lot of find newspapers online and things that newspapers are digitized as well. Think through, you know, boxes. It's kind of a different way for me. But then on the opposite side, when I started this research, Twin Cities Ordnance Plant newspaper was not digitized. And so then having to go through, you know, during quarantine, say, I got 2 hours in Minnesota Surfside and 2 hours here to do this, was a different way of doing it. But I think I probably found more just paging through the microfilm than I would have just digitized and so. We figured it out as part of the fellowship of God, but there, it was an honor to African Americans in the name of Professor Nikolai to make those connections to history. He was a teacher, also a historian, and wrote quite a bit about the African American experience in Minnesota. And a number of us wanted to do the same thing, but didn't necessarily have that background. And so the fellowship allowed us to network with people who knew how to do those things, make those connections, and learn do our research.
Any last questions?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
I'm Laura Oyen, and I'm on the District 10 board. I want to thank you all for coming today. We have been organizing and working on a little project called the Como Neighborhood History Project, which with Martha and Jean and Darlene here, we just try and collect those untold stories or linking up with Tony Johnson too on the Know Your Como, or anyone in the neighborhood who has an interesting neighbor would like to write a little story. We're trying to collect stories today so that they will be the history of the future, so that someone else 50 years from now could look at our little website or whatever and, you know, find what we've collected looking back the time we can. So I want to thank you for coming today. If you haven't signed up for the Como District 10 newsletter, if you like programs like this, contribute a little bit to D10. And then we have, there's some things in the back. Also, we just rolled out our story map with our work on St. Kate students to do the sub-district 4 between the tracks. So all of that is on the District 10 website, and it's a really nice picture map and a short little story of different things that we dug up through the area between the tracks. So, and just a quick show of are you all signed up for the newsletter? Raise your hand if you are. Okay, so that's pretty good. Have you seen the between the tracks story map that's on there? All right, I highly recommend go out to the website, click on it. We did a little story about it, but there are two out there. One for sub-district 1 that we did 2 years ago. One we just did last summer was Between the Tracks at sub-district 4. This next summer, we're going to be interviewing people and doing the history of kind of up Dale to Larpenteur over to Nebraska. So that area, sub-district 3. And then the summer after that, we'll do sub-district 4, working with St. Kate students to do oral history interviews and just to collect history light, you know, people's history versus maybe wonderful scholarship work like Jeremiah has done. Ours is more a little on the light side, but there. So again, thank you so much for coming and really appreciate your time today. I forgot to thank Jenny for our president for doing our Unveiling, so. Yep.